I wrote together with a colleague, Tekeste, a book called Brothers at War, making sense of the Eritrean-Ethiopian war, seeing the trajectories leading up to the war. Now, over the last number of years, I've done research parallel to your own on the border of Tigray and Eritrea. And just earlier this year, I published an article called Brothers at Peace, people-to-people reconciliation between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And I think there are very positive elements you see, but you also see some negative elements, obviously, of the so-called peace process between Eritrea and Ethiopia. To take the positive first, I think over a number of years, but accelerating more recently, is a reconnecting the people of Eritrea and Tigray, Ethiopia. That the former enmity, the former hostility, which was of course engineered by the elite, but which trickled down also to the people-to-people interaction, that has disappeared. That you see a coming togetherness, and particularly, observing this brief window of 3-4 months when the border was open between Eritrea and Tigray, and you see the scenes of reunion, the celebrations, the embrace. It was extremely touching, and I think that has the manifestation of that could not have happened unless a formal peace was established, because it did open the borders. But the people-to-people contact has been ongoing for a longer time and is still there. And as I said, one of the best empirical evidence we do have of the closeness between Eritrea and Tigray in terms of cultural or affinity of closeness is the fact that, I don't know, you might know better, but maybe something about 500,000-600,000 people have fled Eritrea crossing the Tigrayan borders into Tigray. As far as we know, there is not one incident since 2001 until today where an Eritrean individual has been harassed or attacked or misused by Tigrayan peasants who received them, or by Tigrayans who received them on the other side of the border. Not one incident. And we're talking about 500,000-700,000 people. That shows something, that Eritrean individuals have never been perceived as enemies by ordinary Tigrayans. And I think likewise on the other side. Of course, during the intensity of the war, it is a different matter. But outside of that, you have had that bond of commonness. And that was also manifested after the opening of the border in September 2 years ago. But so that's a positive thing. But on the more negative or the more skeptical issues here is the question, why did the peace process come about in the first place now? What was the intentions? What were the motives behind the two people creating it, Abiy Ahmed and Isaias Afwerki? Abiy, I think, had a mixed motive behind entering into the peace process with Eritrea. Yes, I think genuinely, at that time at least, he believed it was time to establish formal peace between the two countries. He wanted to change that stalemate. But at the same time, he also needed to establish new alliances in order to gain a sufficient amount of support and power to confront the TPLF grip of statehood in Ethiopia. And he allied with the Amhara component of the party, but he needed also to go beyond that. And he needed Isaias' input to help restrict the TPLF influence, to use that term. So he had a certain mixed motives, but more genuine interest of peace, I believe. From the Isaias side, and I'm not talking about Eritrean people, I'm talking about from Isaias personally, his interest to enter into the peace process was never peace with Ethiopia as such. It was part of his overall long-term game to crush TPLF, to be the victor, to be the big brother, to be the top guy in the horn. And he saw the opportunity, and he abated his time very carefully, because immediately after Abiy Ahmed came to power, Isaias didn't react anything. He kept quiet all the way until the Martyrs' Day speech on the 20th of June. 3 months after Abiy came to power, he went out, because then he was sure that it was a true change of power in Addis Ababa, that TPLF was really being marginalized, and he could ally with the Oromo component and also the Amhara, paradoxically, component, in order to take revenge upon TPLF and Tigray. And I think that is still guiding the process, sadly enough. It is not peace, it is not it's not the pursuit of establishing peace on the ground, which are the objective of the current process. It is still administered, it is still organized in a manner, how can we inflict the most possible damage on TPLF and TPLF's political control. Hence also the need to reclose the border again after 3 months, for 2 reasons, in my view. The main reason, as viewed from Isaias, is the opening of the border and those 3 months where people were flocking back and forth. It undermined his master narrative that Tigray is the mortal enemy of Eritrea. And secondly, it destabilized the economic control of Isaias and the regime on internal affairs, because you had new investments, new Eritrean entrepreneurs taking advantage of the opening, which came out of control of the regime. So he needed to close it, primarily because he lost control of the master narrative, but also on economic motivations. And on the Ethiopian side, also motivating Isaias to close it again was the main beneficiary of opening of the border was Tigray and TPLF. So he didn't want that to happen. And neither necessarily did Abiy want that to happen. So, but the decision to close the border again was taken by Asmara, not Addis. So they needed to close it. And of course, in all of this, as the Eritrean-Ethiopian border, the main chunk of that, the contested territories, the deep history is Eritrean-Tigray border. And Abiy doesn't control the border, Mekele controls the border. And they are left out of the peace talks. So the peace will never be established on the ground without the participants on the ground being included in it. Yeah.
And I mean, for me, actually, it's you put it in the most positive frame, which is it will not be attained. But for me, if you take the objectives on either side, the objectives of Abiy and the objectives of Isaias, if that was to come to any fruition, it means civil war in Ethiopia effectively. Because if Isaias is so intent on crushing TPLF, and if the reason Abiy is bringing Isaias on board is to help him at least minimize their influence, if not crush them, then effectively he is inviting a foreign government to address his internal issues, political issue at that, and it's a very dangerous trend. And I am upset. I'm angry. It angers me because at the end of the day, it's the people of Tigray and the people of Eritrea who have borne the brunt of this divide. You and I know the region quite well to understand what it does to the border communities and wider afield. In Eritrea or even in Tigray, you cannot talk about border communities as such. Both the entirety of Eritrea, bar the western regions, is a border community, if you like. Same in Tigray. The whole of, you could say, the whole of Tigray is intricately related to that border, and that cross-border community suffers economically, suffers culturally. Families suffer. And I think that's what hasn't been gained. That's the opportunity that has been lost, and that brings me to a thinking. And I'd really like to hear your views on what should the Ethiopian-Eritrean relationship, what should the Tigrayan-Eritrean relationship should look like if peace was the objective.
Yeah, if peace was the objective. Yeah, well, before coming to that, it is certainly in a new turn of reconfiguring itself as we speak, I believe. One of the key fascinating things with the Horn of Africa as a scholar of nationalism and identity is that this is the region in the world where you have the newest sovereign states of Eritrea and South Sudan, a non-accepted state of Somaliland, and you still have state formations in the making, with the possible breakup of Somalia in different statehoods, with the possible breakup of Ethiopia in different statehood, and the possible reconfiguring of current sovereign states into some kind of new entities. So the states as we know it in the Horn of Africa is not permanently settled, and I think you will see changes in the years to come. And right now, the accelerating discourse in Tigray is Tigray statehood and secession from Ethiopia, because they don't feel safe being part of that country any longer, which also, of course, makes them rethink their relationship with Eritrea, not only people-to-people relationship, but also political entities. How should Tigray look like? Is it just Tigray as it is today, or should we need some other arrangement? And definitely we might need to get much closer to Eritrea in some kind of union or whatever. So it is a lot of talk on this, and a lot of thinking in all over Ethiopia, and I also believe inside Eritrea, and in how should Eritrea look like, and what should Eritrea be, and how should Eritrea be allied with whom, and with what kind of arrangements. What an arrangement should look like if peace was in the interest. Well, you need to have new leaders, at least in Eritrea, because I don't think anything. I don't see any sustainable peace on the ground for the Eritrean people or its neighbors as long as the current president is in power, because he has never shown an interest to pursue peace. He has always shown an interest to pursue war and conflict. And that's just a sad empirical observation for the last 30 years. And if anyone can give me evidence of the opposite, I'm very happy to rethink my hypothesis, but I still haven't seen that evidence. So you know, that's a tragedy of it. But you know, he's getting old. He will not be around forever. So we need to think what we really need to work on. What will happen post Isaias? You know, what kind of society will Eritreans want to build in that phase? What would Eritreans want their country to be like, and with what kind of arrangement with neighboring countries?